Welcome all of you, both in this room here in Northeast Portland, as well as those of you that are in cyberspace. Over 100 people signed up for this event, and possibly due to our technical problem, about half of you are with us right now, and welcome. Cody, if you don't mind going to the first slide. So I am Ying Kwong. I am responsible for this state of Oregon's e-government program, as well as the statewide QA program. I work closely with Cody Anders and Jack McDowell. And Jack is one of the speakers today. So on behalf of the statewide QA program of the state of Oregon, welcome. Today's event, if we go to the next slide, is co-hosted by the statewide QA program of the state of Oregon, as well as the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference. We're very happy to have NIC Oregon to be a sponsor of this event. As a sponsor, they are primarily paying for the food and beverages for our Northeast Portland location, so we extend our thanks to them. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend a couple of slides about PNSQC. This is a organization with a long history that's based in Portland, Oregon. It's a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization with 40 years of history. This is the organization's 40th anniversary. I am the secretary for PNSQC, and so on behalf of PNSQC, I also welcome you. PNSQC's focus is on the software quality practitioner, and that ranges for those folks that are involved in the technical end, as well as in the management and supporting aspects of software quality. We have an annual conference as well as a monthly meetup event like this one. And there's also going to be other community events throughout the year. The annual conference has already opened its call for proposals, and additional details can be obtained on the PNSQC's website at pnsqc.org. Next page, please. There are many ways to get involved with PNSQC, which is a very good organization in terms of advocating software quality and diffusing knowledge and information. Besides submitting proposal to our annual conference, there are substantial opportunities for volunteers and sponsorships. We welcome all interested to please contact any of the officers of PNSQC, go to our website, or of course, talk to the many people over the years that have submitted papers and make presentations at PNSQC's conferences. The conference is held annually in Portland, Oregon, when we were able to meet physically. The last couple of years, of course, it was held virtually because of the COVID situation. Next slide, please. Some house rules for today. Again, sorry about the change of the link. This is a hybrid event in that there's a opportunity for those to attend physically in Northeast Portland. I'm happy to see a number of you here in Portland, as well as those of you that are in cyberspace joining us by Zoom. Please make sure, unless you're the speaker, that your mic is muted. And any questions, please send it in through Zoom chat. And for those of you in the room, please write it on a piece of paper and hand it to Moss, who is our site coordinator here. And we'll try to get to the questions at the end of each speaker, as well as hopefully some time at the end. Today's workshop is being recorded, and the information to access the recording will be made available by email after this. The recording will be on YouTube. Let's go to the next slide. So let me give a short keynote before I turn it over to the first speaker, who's Jack. So So let me, so accessibility is kind of a topic of great interest currently to Oregon state government, as with many large organizations, government, nonprofits, and really any large organization that serve a diverse community, including private corporations. The word accessibility, it seems kind of redundant to say accessibility is fundamentally about the ability to access. However, historically, you know, the term accessibility seemed to have gotten the meaning of support of, in the case of online resources such as websites and applications, seem to be associated with supporting folks with disability. Now, it is completely legitimate, and the state of Oregon is entirely committed to supporting folks with disability in terms of our online websites and applications. With that said, I think we can use a more inclusive lens when we look at accessibility. The ability of access is not just limited by people's physical limitations and disability. It is also fundamentally influenced by people's language abilities, literacy level, as well as their ability to access digital connectivity. The fact that there is a kind of wide spectrum of people's language and literacy abilities, as well as ability to access broadband and related technology. Those are obstacles for access, and these are all matters that should be in scope of accessibility. So ultimately, accessibility, I would like to say, in a high level, is about serving your user community. And the user community for large organization typically have your customers or clients, but it also have your own staff and also business partners. We like to see in the future, by working with all our stakeholders in state government and outside of state government, that people's awareness when come to the needs of folks needing access to online resources to be kind of planned out in advance and not as an afterthought. So with that in mind, please, next slide. I think the idea of accessibility as an important attribute of software quality is long overdue. You know, we all know that people are taking a very keen interest on information security as an important attribute for software quality. I think the same should be true for accessibility. And I say this from the perspective that, you know, accessibility is ultimately about serving the needs of human beings, taking a user-centric approach in terms of who it is in your community that would have a easier time accessing online resources. Government organizations, of course, we want to take that inclusive views of enabling all our constituents to be able to get at online resources whenever possible, or other kinds of accommodation be provided. This is a kind of guidance that the state of Oregon is providing to all its agencies through a recently posted accessibility guide document. Those of you interested, please contact myself, Cody, and Jack about this accessibility guide. Now, I think, you know, in terms of software quality, I think, you know, obviously there are many facets of software quality. And, you know, we like to work with all state agencies and those in the public through the PNSQC organization to increase the awareness that fundamentally accessibility is not dumbing down an application and is about meeting human needs. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn over to our first speaker, Jack, who's going to talk about the management aspects of accessibility. Cody, if I can very quickly point out that this presentation is organized in terms of 4 pillars of accessibility. The first one is on accessibility and a management consideration of accessibility, and I'm happy to have Jack give the first talk. The second talk is about inclusive design. We're very happy to have a known speaker in the PNSQC community, Michael Larsen, to be providing that talk. And then we'll follow by our colleagues from Siteimprove, who's providing a tool for the state of Oregon to use for testing for accessibility compliance with different standards. And last but not least, we have our colleagues, Matt Snow of NIC Oregon, who will be telling us how all of these things are brought together to serve a very important enterprise for those of us that live in Oregon, and that is, of course, the State of Oregon enterprise. With that said, here's Jack. Thank you very much.
I'm Jack McDowell, interim program manager for the Statewide Care program, but I also work very closely with the eGov program at Enterprise Information Services in the state of Oregon. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Okay, so let's get started. Accessibility, great topic today because with the challenges we had getting in, we realized that accessibility can really impact even a Zoom meeting just by being able to get in or not, and just having the wrong link or missing a password. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a broader meaning of the word accessibility. But just so you know, I want to talk a little bit about definitions and scope, standards and requirements, maturity models, and measuring progress, and just some further considerations. So, you know, just like a little blurb, managing accessibility is a multi-pronged process. And, you know, I'd like you all to know that it's important to understand your community. What that means is, what does accessibility mean to you? Ying and I have written some papers in the past and presented at PNSQC talking about communities of meaning. And one example is a tomato a vegetable or a fruit? And I guess there's not too many people here to yell at me and say, we all think it's a fruit, we already know it's not a vegetable anymore. You know, but I don't know. It depends. What does it depend on? It depends on your community. So if you're a botanist, you'll say it's a fruit, right? And we know scientifically it's a fruit. But a nutritionist will say nutritionally it's a vegetable. Now, which answer is right and which answer is wrong? It depends, right? It depends on a frame of reference. That's what we mean when we say our community of meaning. So for people that work with the state a lot, our Oregon DOJ has a very specific legal understanding of, say, for example, the word shall, the word must. These words have specific legal meanings in the state of Oregon, in the legal practice. Whenever I'm talking with people, I might say, you know, you shall do this or other. It has like no legal weight. It just is different. Like as a parent, you know, it's something that I try and tell my kids, you shall do this. They know there's no legal requirement for them to do any of that. They just turn around and say, bye, Dad. See you later. And you know, just for a bit of continued humor, we have the other question. What about ketchup, right? There's a funny history of, you know, some previous administrations having said ketchup might actually be, I don't know if at the time it was probably a vegetable. Now we'd say a fruit. Anyway, it's a condiment, right? It just depends, it depends. And so that's what we're trying to say here whenever we talk about accessibility. So typically we think of accessibility in terms of the ADA, wheelchair ramps, and things like that. Now, we're talking about websites and online accessibility. So, you know, we primarily think about physical disabilities. Just trying to check the timer. And this definition comes from the W3C. Now, the W3C is what we use as the basis of our standards in the state of Oregon, and we'll talk a little bit about later. But I think it's important to sort of break this down. What are we saying whenever we use the word disability, right? I do also want to make a note. We'll share the slides later. So if anyone, you know, please. But whenever we talk about disability, we need to remember that this is a contested concept. Now, I purposefully chose a Wikipedia link so that it's not like I'm presenting some obscure academic breakdown of the word disability. This is just from Wikipedia, from the Wikipedia article on accessibility. It talks about how it's a contested subject. Why? Because whenever we say that something is or is not a disability, what are we actually saying? We're saying, we're putting it either on a binary or in a continuum, and you were saying, okay, under this medical accepted definition, there is this thing that is considered standard, or I'll use the word normal, and then there is this thing that is considered disabled. Now, that is pretty controversial, although it has not been historically. Historically, if we think of disability as, well, it's great that we're thinking of the people that need wheelchairs, people that need glasses, but it's important that we recognize that what we're doing by having this clear-cut binary is, in a way, embodying this understanding of an ableist society. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to disabilities. And like, I don't want to say that. What I think we should do is we should think of this concept of accessibility as part of a bigger picture. And you'll get more information specific to this from the different speakers that are going to be talking about today. But in a way, as it says here, we see that our understanding of accessibility is moving more to blurred boundaries with more overlap of these different concepts, right? So it's not that we think of accessibility as one thing and usability as another and inclusion as another. Really, these things all work, these concepts all work together. And in fact, there aren't really any, what I would say, any standards on usability, just like there are on accessibility that are internationally recognized standards. But if you look at some of the research that's been published on usability, you see that a lot of the key tenets are very similar to those that are used for accessibility. It's about, for usability, it's about being able to understand and access the information readily. And there's a paper at the end that sort of breaks these down a little bit, and you can see how similar they are. Now, there we go. So, like Ying was saying earlier, what I'd like us to do is to think about accessibility as access, right? And if anyone thinks about the etymology of the word accessibility, that is, in fact, where it comes from, right? It comes from the Latin word to access, right? Right, acceso for people that speak Spanish. Now, this is just some quick points of information for you all to realize how important this is. According to the Oregon Department of Education, students speak 160 unique languages at home, right? Obviously, the main one is Spanish, but then we also have Chinese, Russian, and a few other languages that make up the bulk of this. But it's important to know that I think it's about 20% of students speak these 160 different languages at home. And that's just sort of a ballpark estimate, but it is a significant number. It's hundreds of thousands of students in the state of Oregon. Now we talk about literacy, right? 54% of adults in the United States cannot read at the 6th grade level. And that's like 139 million people in the US. And now another interesting one is this broadband access. So 23% of people don't have broadband in the United States, and that's about 75 million people, right? So what these numbers I hope will show you is that really, by expanding our view of accessibility, what is accessibility, we can actually target some of these other things that we really care about in the state of Oregon, and I imagine most places, such as diversity inclusion and also improving usability for our software products or communications or anything else. Like I said before, I don't want this to be a postmodernist presentation where I say, nothing means anything and just do whatever you want. Standards have a role. I know because people know me and they say, oh, that guy who just loves Derrida and blues, and she's just gonna go on some like rhizome conversation about the meaning of words. And okay, but what am I trying to say here? the standard can work as a foundation. And on that foundation, then you can start building up depending on what your organization or your community needs, right? So for example, standards is just a very, very basic example. You know, what do standards cover? They cover things like color contrast, font size, and accessibility device support. So screen readers, closed captions, right? Now this is a good example, the screen reader, for what I was mentioning before in terms of access that goes beyond just what we define as accessibility. So saying, for example, your website can be read and navigated with a screen reader is great. If you have a screen reader, if you have a screen reader installed, if you have it enabled, if you can hear as well, right? There's all these other things that go along with just saying like, okay, I hit that benchmark. Oh my gosh, okay. I apologize about the time. So one of the advantages, some of the advantages are that standards are testable, repeatable, and that they help with compliance. But as I mentioned before, and like as I hope you take away from this presentation, we have limited user coverage, they're technology dependent, and they have a lack of community understanding. So standards may provide a good starting point, but they may need to be augmented to meet business needs. Now, this is just very brief, an outline of our Oregon government guidance on accessibility. And you'll notice that we talk about WCAG, federal accessibility law, which may or may not apply to your state agency, depending on whether you receive federal funds. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not pretending to be a lawyer. Please consult with your DOJ Assistant Attorney General if you have questions. Oregon plain language law, which is a law that says that content needs to be at accessible and readable level. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, so I'm not sure what exactly that means in each individual context. And we do have this multilingual access and translation point that talks about, again, I am not in your agency, so I am in no position to tell you exactly what materials need to be translated and enabled in different languages. That is going to be highly dependent on your organization and what type of agency you are. You know, or if you're a private company here listening, who your customers are, right? And who you're trying to target. Now, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. I know we're a bit short on time. And these are the slides that I was mentioning. Please don't worry about screenshotting. I have a link at the end of the presentation. And the idea is that when we talk about a maturity model and accessibility, we're not just getting accessibility going at 100% from day one, right? That is an unrealistic expectation that's just going to prime your organization for failure. So this is a CMMI, the Carnegie Mellon maturity model. And I'm sure you're all familiar with it, or if not, you are now. And there are 5 stages from initial to optimizing. And if we think about what this looks like in accessibility, this is the University of Arizona IT Accessibility Maturity Model. We can see that we have 5 levels, and the state of Oregon right now is probably going from level 1 to level 2 for some specific things, like say our templates for the websites. They are pretty accessible right now if you use the e-government program website. So maybe those are in 3. Some things are going to 4, but it depends, right? It's not like we're just right down one line. Why am I bringing this up, and why am I saying, hey, the state of Oregon is probably around level 2? Because we're making progress. In the last couple of years, we've made huge progress. We have some people from Siteimprove coming in to talk about one of the tools we're rolling out, and we're in a very exciting moment. And the reason I want to bring that up is because as an agency or an organization, you should just feel good about making progress and understand that getting to an optimized level is time consuming and expensive and requires a lot of resources. And so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. I just have some further considerations. I know I'm like really low on time. So I just want to say, make sure you comply with laws and regulations to your agency, understand your community. It's important. Planning, continuous improvement, Deming cycle type stuff. And There we go. Keep in mind that accessibility is not a zero-sum game. You don't have to like take something from something else. Like I mentioned before, when we think about inclusion, usability, and accessibility, they all grow together, right? If you grow one thing, you're growing other things, and we'll have more information on that later. And you know, you can read the rest. I know we're late on time, so that's pretty much it for me. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
The way that we wanted to present this and the point of this is that we wanted to broaden the explanation here and to not limit our conversation to specifically accessibility as it relates to persons with disabilities. While that is extremely important, there are many other people that can be impacted by the way that we design things. And here's a perfect example. I'm having to actually do this over a phone with a hard data cap. So this is one of those areas where like, I'm hoping that we can make this work. But this is an example of where something can be inaccessible for a very different reason. But be that as it may, let's see how far we can go with this. The talk that I'm going to be giving today is called The Cross-Section of Accessibility and Inclusive Design, with an emphasis on the latter, because inclusive design goes both beyond accessibility and it works in a way that accessibility traditionally doesn't. So I'll give you a quick rundown as to who I am. My name is Michael Larsen. I am a senior quality assurance engineer with Learning Technologies Group and PeopleFluent. Their Learning Technologies Group is located in England. PeopleFluent is located in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I am located in my house here in San Bruno, California. I have a blog called TestHead, and you can also follow me on Twitter at MKLTestHead. I'm also the producer of the Testing Show podcast. With that in mind, let's go ahead and let's take a talk about what inclusive design specifically is. Now, we already got a definition of accessibility, so I'm not going to go over that. What I want to talk about, though, is the idea that inclusive design is the design of mainstream products and or services accessible to and usable by as many people as reasonably possible. But here's the additive part: without the need for special adaptation or specialized design. So the whole idea behind inclusive design is that we want to make things as usable as possible for as many people as possible without requiring extra steps. If you are a sightless user, a screen reader is not just a good idea, it's essential. You need that screen reader, pardon me, to access that information. What do you do for those, however, where that's not the end requirement? Or what if a screen reader, is not available to you? Is there a way that you can work with that to help as many people as possible? Also, if you are not limited to being sightless, if you have limited vision, that's a different story than being completely sightless. If you have limited hearing, that's a different story than being completely deaf, etc. So these are the things that we want to be able to consider as we talk about inclusive design to be as usable by as many people as humanly possible. So that's the whole point, to extend the definition of inclusive. And the point is that I wanted to say accessible need not be limited to disabilities. There are many situations where people can be temporarily put into a category of less abled. I want to give a couple of examples here of what we like to call secondary or situational issues. So your hearing can be affected in a loud environment. My favorite example is, let's say you're at a concert, like a rock show, and your phone rings. Are you going to be able to take that call in the live room? Or would that be a good opportunity instead to say, you know what, maybe this should go to text? Your cognitive abilities can be modified in a heartbeat if you are put in a stress situation. If you have to use a website that doesn't use responsive design and you're on a mobile device, your visual ability with that site is limited. If you have to deal with a second language or a language that you don't normally speak, or if you have limited literacy, that can also be a barrier. I remember when I got off the plane in Copenhagen, Denmark, a number of years ago, and I saw a billboard that was all in Danish, and I was lost. I couldn't tell you a word that was on it. Thankfully, I got to a place where it was bilingual and I could actually use English to figure out where to go. Danish is not a language I speak. So in a Danish environment, I'm functionally illiterate. And of course, you can also have situations to where when you get your, when you have to deal with a surgery or if a bone breaks or something happens, your mobility can be shot. And now you must deal. So one of the things I want to suggest, and a great resource for this, and I use this frequently, is from the Home Digital Office, and the UK Home Office has these great posters that talk about accessibility, but I picked and chose these so we could step a little bit away from the traditional accessibility requirements. And so I can talk about this more from an inclusivity standpoint. So here are some examples. So when you're dealing with deaf or hard of hearing, note, things you want to do. You want to write things in plain language. You don't want to use complicated words or figures of speech. Subtitles are fantastic. If you're audio or video only and you have no ability of otherwise seeing what's there, that's going to be problematic. A simple, linear, easy to tab layout works for everybody. Making a complex layout with lots of internested elements, not so good. You want to be able to break up your content in ways that are meaningful, and HTML5 allows you to do this instead of having big, long blocks of text. And also, is an example of how can you effectively work with this? If you can text versus if you have to use a phone and speak to somebody to be able to do something. Now, note I'm going to say designing for users with low vision. And low vision can be a sliding scale. The key idea here is you want to be able to use colors and contrast, be able to make text expandable. You want to be able to have all information in a single place. You shouldn't have to dig for it, and you shouldn't have to bounce around a page to find the information you need. Don't use colors to convey meaning, at least not by themselves. Yes, red means stop, green means go, yellow means slow down or stop, but it doesn't mean, what it doesn't mean is only use those options, because if you only use those options, it's going to limit you significantly if you don't understand what the context is. And that goes even if you're dealing with low vision or not. So designing for users with dyslexia. You want to be able to use images and diagrams to support your text. You want to be able to produce material in other formats, for example, audio or video. And you want to be able to keep your content short, clear, and simple. When you're dealing with physical or motor disabilities, you want to make large clickable actions and minimize a demand for precision. You want to give space, and you want to allow for such things like keyboard or speech-only use. You want to make sure you don't require a lot of interactions that require a lot of movement. Also, be really careful when it comes to timeouts, because some people just can't react in a fast enough manner. Now let's talk about anxiety. Yeah, anxiety also fits in here. Some people struggle with time limits, as we said before. So give users enough time to complete an action. Give you very specific what's going to happen after you do each thing instead of having it be nebulous. Make the information as clear as possible and try not to nest things in a way that's going to make it hard for people to understand what's happening. give the support necessary so that people understand what they are doing, and also give people a chance to check what they're doing before it has to be submitted. So those are all examples. These are all things that fit into the category for, yes, these are accessibility elements, but they're also inclusive elements. And the neat thing is most of what I've described does not require you to have any special assistive technology to work. So in addition to this, I want to give you a suggestion to help you think inclusively. And this is a mnemonic that was given to me by Albert Gureyev, and I greatly appreciate this, and it's be humble. Humble stands for humanize. In other words, see what it is to work with something from other people's perspective. Unlearn. If you have certain skills that you have picked up and that you take for granted, try to step away from them. Model. Think about other people in the way that they would have to interact with a product, even in its less than ideal settings. Build. Understand how to interact with systems. Understand how to do what is necessary in a way that may not be your first approach. Learn. Understand how and why people have to respond this way. And then experiment. Play around with these things. See what works. See what doesn't. Discover what gives you problems that you may never have considered, being that you may have not ever been in a situation to have to worry about this. So I have a couple of tools that everybody can play with pretty much off the bat. One of the things that I would suggest, if you want to make your sites inclusive, make your sites literate. And what I mean by literate in this case is not have this super complex vocabulary, but try to make what you are saying as simple as possible. And a beautiful tool for this is the Hemingway editor. So if you're looking at text you want to put on your screen, run it through Hemingway. And my recommendation, they recommend 9th grade reading level. I recommend 6th grade. Where possible. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do that simply because of the fact that you have to present something technical. And a 6th grader may not understand what you're going for. For the technical parts, fair enough. But for everything else, try your level best to aim for that grade 6 level. And it gives you suggestions as to how to fix or change the phrases that you need. Another tool I want to suggest is something called Funkify. Now there's a free version of it and there's also a premium version of it. The premium version gives you a lot of opportunities for testing out experiments that will let you look at what happens for somebody with blurry vision, what happens when somebody has color blindness, what happens when somebody has dyslexia, fill in the blank. And so there's a number of things, and you can adjust the level of difficulty. So what this does is it allows you to check your site using this tool to be able to go through and see, hey, what's the experience like through these simulations? And again, that works with being humble. You're learning and you're modeling. And then the last example that I like to give is the before and after site that the WAI organization has, Web Accessibility Initiative. The before and after demonstration will show you what a site looks like when it is not optimized for accessibility and inclusive design, and then when it is optimized for accessibility and inclusive design. And here's the neat thing, when you toggle back and forth, your first interaction is probably going to be, these sites don't look all that different. I don't understand. I thought that there was going to be some big change. And the irony is, usually there isn't. But the steps you take to allow this to be as usable as possible for as many as possible can be a huge boon for your site and for your services. And yeah, you don't have to say, oh, my site's going to look awful if I do all of this. Not true. Still not convinced? Well, I want to give a couple of things to help you on this. And again, I respect everybody's time here. Think of yourself in the future and that your everyday experience may not be what it is today. Remember that not everybody is the same as you or has the same faculties that you have. Practice empathy. Again, go back to my mnemonic, be humble. And think about the future. Back to the first one. You may be the one who ends up benefiting the most from your own design. With that, I have a couple of things you can point to. By all means, take a look at the British Standards Institute article on what is inclusive design to get a deeper feel for it. And if I have to pick one book that I would suggest that covers both accessibility and inclusive design, that is A Web for Everyone by S. Horton and W. Quesenberry. And with that, I will say thank you for your time and your attention. Yes, are there any questions? Yes.
Hey, and maybe this is for all of our speakers. One of the things that I'm interested in, and I'm here representing Tyler Technologies NIC, is whether we've thought about accessibility needs for people who we tend to see in the homeless community. And these would be people who have mental health issues and drug-related addiction issues. Some people are perfectly sane, but we also know that they have there's a high percentage of smartphone usage among this population. And I'm wondering if there's been much work or study or investigation into the types of user experiences that those populations might be receptive to.
Specific to the homeless, to homeless users, I cannot speak to that. I do not know if there have been specific studies or specific work towards it, but that does absolutely fall into the categories of both cognitive disabilities and, again, also using smartphones or having that be your sole technology. So if your sole technology is a smartphone and you might be dealing with any host of cognitive disabilities, if your site is not, number one, responsive, in other words, able to display on a smartphone, you're going to cause stress right there. And having to struggle through or broaden out and look for something and squeeze back and move, and it could literally exhaust. It exhausts regular, everyday people with, air quotes here, full cognitive facility. And you can interpret that any way you want to. But when you are dealing with somebody who is under additional cognitive stress, including being homeless and all that goes with that, I can only imagine that would make it even more frustrating. So it's an interesting avenue. It's not something I can speak to directly. Maybe other speakers can. But yeah, it is absolutely something to consider and to look at when trying to deal with those who are trying to interact with your product.
I can pick up a little bit on that as well. As Michael just mentioned, I'm not aware of any studies directly on that population, on the homeless population. But after being at the CSUN conference 2 weeks ago, which is one of the larger industry conferences for accessibility, interacting with W3C pretty regularly, cognitive is a huge initiative within the W3C, whether it's addressing those capabilities, those needs of that particular audience via the guidelines, or at least an awareness of how cognitive functioning or not functioning is related to that technology. There's definitely some interest in that at that cognitive level. So I can agree with Michael 100% on that, but I'd be curious to see as well. I'm not aware of any direct correlation to a homeless population. Yeah, kind of I guess a segue into the tooling aspects of it. So I'm going to take a little different path, you guys. We're going to talk about Siteimprove as a tool and really about automation, the tooling, some of the technologies that you are going to be getting more familiar with if you're not already. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. I've got always got a lot to cover. I'll probably talk more quickly than I should, but at the same time, this information will be available and more than happy to answer questions as we go. So really going to focus on just a couple types of tooling today. First of all, I am Kevin Rydberg. I'm Managing Accessibility Consultant from Siteimprove. Siteimprove is a tool that is being provided to the state of Oregon. And so you guys, if you're not already using it or have some preliminary training on it, you will be eventually. And it doesn't matter if you're a developer, a designer, a content person. What we want to do is we make sure that we get the right tools in your hands. And there's a lot of flexibility involved in the tooling. It's one of the things we're going to cover. So the different types that we'll address are really the platform, which is kind of the centerpiece of what we're going to talk about today. But an important piece of that is going to be integrations, and I'll address that towards the end. But keep in mind that there are a lot of accessibility extensions out there that are very valuable that go beyond what any of the commercial platforms offer. A lot of them have accessibility checking, but think about some of the additional tools that you're already familiar with, whether it's color contrast checkers or things like that will enhance what some of the tools capabilities are or are not. Now, just a quick overview of the Siteimprove tool set. It's actually a very comprehensive platform, but there are a variety of different solutions that are available. And we have those 3 solutions that I'll address. Starting in the center, it's kind of the inclusivity, which is accessibility and QA. Then we have content experience, which would then include SEO and performance, all the way into marketing performance. So we have a lot of different products, but as you see, the core of what we're really talking about is based on inclusivity. So it is about making sure that accessibility is being addressed. It's helping with quality assurance. And the platforms are getting more and more powerful and offering you lots of information. So be careful that we don't overload you with information as well. So what we want to focus on today is really making Siteimprove part of your workflow. We're not asking you to change everything that you're doing as you're producing web content, whether it's from the design element or updating pages. What we want to do is we want to provide you tools to be more efficient and to address things that you maybe haven't been concerned with in the past. So between the Siteimprove plugins, extensions, and the platform itself, which you'll have access to, we want to provide a ton of information for you. What's really going to be important is content lifecycle. It's cyclical, just like everything else. So what we want to do is we want to integrate into your lifecycle wherever possible, whether it's early on in the publishing process or as the pages are out there and are live and have things like broken links. That is a QA issue, but it's also an accessibility issue because let's face it, a broken link is not accessible for anyone. So what we want to do, and as we'll go a little deeper in, we'll start to talk about some of the different CMS tools, some of the very large ones, and even some of the smaller ones that we can integrate right into. So I'm not going to get all commercial advertising talking about. I'm trying to just give you a little bit of background where we're at with the Siteimprove tools. So there's a couple things that are going to be very important for you to understand as you're implementing automated accessibility checking, whether it's our tools or any of the other ones that are available. I want to remind you that automated testing is only as powerful as the manual testing that will enhance it or accompany it. So there are a lot of really important features and functions of automated testing tools that are going to really speed up and handle large volumes and things like that. But there are some downsides to it as well. And this is why I'm going to talk about the automated tools and then the manual process as well. We're going to go through 2 lists, pluses and minuses for each. Okay, so first and foremost, with an automated tool, you can really look at a big picture of what's going on across all of your sites. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have one site that you're managing or 50 or 1,000. You don't know, how all of those sites are performing just due to the volume. An automated tool can really help you get that big picture, which in turn that efficiency saves time and makes it cost effective. It can scale up from a single page all the way on up. And it is consistent, follows those WCAG guidelines, those rules that have been talked about already today. And keep in mind that you can schedule things, whether it's reporting or actually running additional scans, things like that. Okay. Now, some of the problems that we run into with automated testing tools is the limitation of the technology at this point. Okay. And what I mean by that is there can be some questionable accuracy because the tests that are written are literal interpretations, yes or no answers. Okay. There's not much that can be done when it comes to decision making or some of the, the context that needs to be invested into some of the accessibility functionality. And again, thousands, hundreds, thousands, or millions of pages can give you that data overload. It's like, all right, I don't even know where to start with all this information. The tools can get expensive as you scale up. And keep in mind that some of the WCAG or the success criteria themselves can't be checked by automated tools. Not ours, not anybody's. Okay, so there are things like keyboard testing and other pieces of accessibility that are going to remain manual at this point. Okay, but the biggest thing I want you to take away from this particular slide is that the biggest problem with accessibility automated tools is the assumption is that that's enough. We've done all we need to do with accessibility because we've passed all the tests in what the tools have told us. And that's just simply not the case because of the coverage. Now, you'll hear numbers from 25 to 60% coverage, depending on which marketing team is talking to at the moment. But just be aware that it can be anywhere in there. There's so many variables that we can't even really tell you how much coverage we can provide until we're actually in there and scanning those pages to see what's there. Okay, so now the manual testing has some strengths and weaknesses as well. And you'll see again how they dovetail together and how they really help you build a comprehensive accessibility program. First and foremost, manual testing, you're more likely to find, quote, real user issues. Now, this is where that blurring was spoken about earlier of the blurring of lines between usability, accessibility, things like that, how it may be accessible to the letter of the law, but it's still not usable, so that, it crosses over into that non-accessible piece. The human element is important because it allows us to make those decisions like we talked about, okay? So there's some flexibility there. Can this pass? Maybe, or yes. Does it fail? Maybe, or yes, okay? So we're getting deeper into the user testing side and the design result sides from the human viewpoint. So whether we're looking at wireframes and mock-ups that cannot be automated to get those results, or whether, we're looking at some of the manual keyboard tests, things like that, the human element is important. So again, keep in mind that the context is what's important, and there's the ability to make judgment calls on whether something will pass or fail. Okay, so now the minuses on that is exactly the same as what a positive is that human element. You can't really repeat tests. Okay, you can't reuse them. How you feel on one day and you run the same test the next day may give you two different results yourself. Okay, so the consistency of that automated scan, checking things the same day in and day out, gives you that consistency. Okay, it's hard work. So tester burnout is a real problem. It's a difficult job. It's very intensive. And so it's very easy to get frustrated if all you're doing all day long is manually testing pages for accessibility. Because some of those tests are difficult to perform, whether it's a multi-page form that you have to go through and fill out that can't really be automated, or determining if error messages on that form are good or bad. There's some heavy lifting at times to get through some of those tasks that you're asked to perform. That, like I said, you can't really reuse those manual results because you as a tester may provide two different results on two different days. So again, it's less thorough. You don't have that volume or coverage. Now, one thing I do want to address as we're speaking about these things, and that's you're probably hearing a lot about artificial intelligence or machine learning in the accessibility space. And I'm here to tell you guys, that's a long way down the road. It's a lot of marketing speak right now. There is a ton of potential. There's a lot of really interesting projects going on with companies like IBM and even Microsoft and others. But it's going to be a while before artificial intelligence is at that point where it can make some of those judgment calls we're talking about. A perfect example of that is reviewing alt attributes on images. Context is all that matters here. And why is this image on the page? What is it trying to communicate? Well, artificial intelligence or even machine learning at this point does not have the capability to give you those correct answers right now. So keep an eye on it. I think in the next 5 years, you'll start to see some advances, but it's a ways off yet. So if somebody tries to tell you that they're using artificial intelligence to make a website accessible, I will call them out on it every time. Okay, so now the tool itself, we're going to go into just a kind of a really quick tour, but I'm not going to talk about the tool functions as much as I'm talking about what's going to be important to you, especially you content folks that are just getting your hands on this for the first time. We really want you to feel comfortable that we're providing the right kinds of information. So to do that, we will talk about things like the tool requirements. And that is first and foremost, those WCAG guidelines, okay? Whether it's A, AA, or AAA, the tool should have the capabilities. In this case, we're working with a new set of guidelines that's about 1.5 years old called the W3C's Automated Conformance Testing Rules. And what that means is there's a set of guidelines for testing tools like ours and others in the industry so that we agree testing an image or testing a form element is always done the same way. So there's consistency from tool to tool, a lot less judgment calls on, false positives and things like that. Keep aware that the guidelines are always being updated and changing. Currently, the federal standard calls for WCAG 2.0. The active published version is 2.1. 2.2 will be here before the end of the summer. And they're working on something called the Silver Project, which is actually WCAG 3.0. Now, each of these is building on the older version. They're more enhancements and updates than they are switching out the rules. So things like mobile didn't have great coverage in the past. Well, now they do. Okay, there's much better. Things like the cognitive issues that we were talking about earlier, that is very important that some of those things are being addressed, whether it's timing, timer elements, whether it's things like, motion videos and being able to stop them. A lot of these things are coming in the guidelines and are being addressed. Keep in mind as well that we're all getting older. And as our population increases in age, we are dealing with issues we may not have been dealing with a while back. So even the aging piece has become a very important part of the guidelines. Now, in this case, we also are offering some best practices, which they may or may not pass the guidelines, or they may not be required, but as a best practice, you may want to exercise it. A perfect example of that is having a heading structure that's very recognizable in hierarchy, H1, H2, H3, in that order. Now, it's not necessarily a guideline, but it is a best practice. And if you're an assistive tech user, a screen reader user, it's important to you that you have a clear understanding of that navigation structure. I also have a bullet on here to address mobile apps, and there's a couple things to keep aware of. Most sites are responsive now, so they will work on any device, but apps are something different, and they are a closed environment, and there's not really any tooling out there right now that can do mobile app testing in an automated fashion. So pretty much any mobile apps that are being developed right now are still relying on manual accessibility testing from top to bottom, complete the task and move on from there. Okay. As far as flexibility goes and scalability, think about things like how many sites am I trying to manage myself? Okay. How many domains, how many subsites do I have? How many pages do I have in each of these different sites? The tool should be able to give you a very clear indication of what that would be. In this case, in this example, I'm just showing that there are 119 sites in this particular account, and we're scanning all of them. Okay, you can see the page counts that are listed here, and you can be even more granular than that and go down to sections. Okay, and what I mean by that is if you are a user who's only responsible for press releases in 2021, 2022, you can have just those folders or just those pages assigned. So that user management is going to be an important piece as well. And there is a very robust management tool here so that you can have that 30,000-foot view as a manager all the way on down to individual pages that individuals may be assigned to. So keep in mind that user management becomes a very important part, especially for the folks that are maybe a director or somebody that is in charge of multiple sites. So we talk about complexity. I was talking about thousands or millions of pages. You can take it right down to a single page check within this tool, and that's going to be important. Most of the tools have this functionality, but keep in mind if you are working on a page and you're just updating that page, taking care of those issues, you need to be able to go in there, hone down on it, and really focus on that single page. So keep that in mind. Those are capabilities that are going to allow you to get very specific, or again, you can deal with that high volume, those large numbers of hundreds or even thousands of pages. Ease of use is very important, and what I mean there is we really want to focus on you as a user, and this kind of gets back into that user management. You can also manage your pages, your sites, the issues that are important to you. If you're a content person, you're not going to be focused on template pages. You're not going to be focused on some of the other bigger aspects that go beyond what your capabilities may be. Maybe you can't deal with the form elements because they're managed in a different way than what you do in your content management system. You're simply there to update content, to add pages, things like that. So keep that in mind, that the ability to really focus on your own issues versus having to see a lot of static, a lot of noise of all of the things that are going on in the site, that becomes important very quickly. And then we're going to get right down into the pages themselves, and just know that it's important that you can focus on the problems. So there's a lot of important features of ease of use that you're going to want to be familiar with. First and foremost is that visual identification. Where is that problem? Okay, so you want something that may highlight directly on the page, okay, so that you can see that, hey, if I go in here, I know exactly where, what I'm looking at. But at the same time, you may want to take that same issue and then go in and look at the code and see what's going on with that code. So being able to go back and forth between the page view itself and the code view can be a very important tool for you, depending on how you're comfortable working. Let's say that you are just getting your feet on the ground with accessibility, trying to understand why something is a problem, why we have flagged it, becomes important. So having a knowledge bank at your fingertips to understand what's going on and what needs to be done to fix this issue is crucial. And for that, our tool in particular has a fantastically robust built-in help system. Whether it is explaining what the issue is, why it's a problem, linking back to the guideline itself, to the actual technical test of how the test is checking for different elements, for you devs that may be more interested in how things are working at that level, all the way to something like a code example, which is available right within the tool. So we can say, all right, here is an example of a solution for a link issue. And then here is a blank set of code that you can utilize to customize and build as your own. So keeping in mind, having access to that information, trying to understand accessibility, it's important that you're going to have access to more help. There's a very robust help center. There are blog posts, there are FAQs, and there's even an academy if you're wanting to learn about accessibility, for example, on a higher level. Then you can utilize the tools that are here. What we're trying to do is put everything at your fingertips so that you don't have to search around and find it. You have the information that you need to feel comfortable understanding accessibility and making those corrections as needed. Reporting is going to be one last feature that's going to be important to you guys. And that is because you can customize that look to track what work have I done, what work needs to be focused on. That can be automated, like I mentioned earlier, but keep in mind too that all of this data can be rolled up. So if you have a quarterly or an annual report that you need to generate and show that progress of your team, you want those capabilities. So part of the tooling should also include the ability to report and show that progress. Okay. One last thing is that Academy link that I was just showing you, providing the right kind of training so that you're comfortable, whether it's using the Siteimprove tools or other accessibility tools, accessibility training itself. Just look at things like the Siteimprove Academy and other resources out there to give you the information that you need. Now, I know time is going quickly, so I think we can probably take a couple minutes for some questions. But I hope that was just a very quick introduction to what tooling and automated accessibility testing can do for you to really get you on the right path to accessible, usable web pages. Any questions?
Can agencies schedule a more in-depth tutorial with the Siteimprove staff?
Yes, there will be tutorials, there will be training sessions, there will be quite a bit of information shared. This is really your, like I said, your brief introduction to what the tooling should include, how it can be utilized, and what to expect coming up. Ying?
Yes, for those of you that are state staff, I want to let you know that we are on the verge of announcing services. Is a subscription with Siteimprove that will give you access to a lot of the tools that was discussed by Kevin. And this is just on the verge of being announced. I think they're sorting out some final access related accessibility from the password protection and things like that. Once that's sorted out, really within business days, these features will release to state folks, and the training modules is part of these services. So please stay tuned on that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Snow. I'm the Director of Creative Services for NIC Oregon. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit about building and selecting accessible services. So for about the next 15 minutes, I'll just go through this discussion, and then towards the end, hopefully we'll have about 5 minutes for questions, similar to how Kevin did. So this won't be a technical discussion, so I won't have a shred of code in it or anything like that. It'll be sort of more of a, from the vantage point of a playbook or suggestions. And this is kind of backed by our experience from NIC and our partnership with Oregon's e-government program, because we have built templates and services for the last, I guess, 7+ years, something like that, and have been a partner with them and learned throughout the process. And the accessible service that we have today are sort of the proof of that. And our latest partnership with Siteimprove that just happened this year is another exciting chapter to that journey. And we're just really enjoying that tool. And you'll see that tool in my discussion here. So, like I said, real quick, my name is Matt Snow. I manage the web team for NIC Oregon, and we build and consult on content, design, testing, and governance. We have a very close partnership with many, many government agencies. And myself, I've worked for 4 or with 5 state governments and in the federal space over the last 15 years or so. So I've kind of been in the government space for a good long while, both as a state employee and as an employee of NIC, who is now Tyler Technologies. And so, you know, I've been around the block when it comes to building government services. I'm also a brand new parent, so just give me a little bit of grace here. But I will say, like I say here, it's the most incredibly worthwhile situational disability I've ever experienced in my life. So, and with that, my team partners with the e-government program, and we build and extend and maintain and help over 100 Oregon agencies build accessible digital services. So we've partnered with many of the state employees, our state agencies in Oregon. We also build websites and consult on content as a part of that as well. And that's where we've actually had the most experience working with Siteimprove over the last couple of months. Actually, the first website just rolled out last month. It's the governor's website that was sort of from end to end using this Siteimprove tool to test everything sort of from the development through creating content and then now into sort of the maintenance space. And we've handed that off to the governor office staff, and that's currently getting like a 97 out of 100 as far as like an accessibility score. So just saying it is possible to build these services, very possible, and very possible through all sorts of types of partnerships, regardless of if there are development developers on staff and things of that nature. So a few just terms that we've gone over today. Different speakers have talked about different aspects of accessibility and inclusion. For my discussion, I'm going to speak a little bit more about accessibility as it does equate to things like standards and whatnot. And I absolutely agree with the rest of the speakers wholeheartedly that a lot of this process is more empathic and including others and being humble and being open than it is just meeting standards. But you got to start somewhere, right? And there are levels to which you need to meet that can be tested, that can be obtained, and can be scored. And then on top of that is all of those lovely aspects that other speakers talked about when it comes to empathy, understanding, being adaptable, and including others, especially those with disabilities or without, in your process. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about accessibility than anything else. So I'm going to kind of go through this as sort of like a step 1 through step 5 kind of path. So the first thing you really need to do is understand what your base requirements and goals are. Now, like all the others have mentioned, things like standards are sort of a baseline. You add other aspects of testing and inclusion on top of that, but there are these basic requirements that you do need to meet. And you as a service builder or a service owner, you definitely need to get kind of an idea as to what your requirements and goals are. And let's go over some of these. We've mentioned the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG or WCAG. That's an international guideline set that is added to and maintained by just an enormous amount of people across the entire world. This is actually the guidelines that the e-government program has determined is the right path and the right bar for e-government program members to meet. So this is the one that we kind of strive the most for in our partnership with the state. This covers things like blindness, low vision, deafness, and hearing loss, and building services sort of from at the code level that meet those guidelines. Now, the WCAG guidelines consist of goals. They don't consist of code snippets or copy and paste, that type of stuff for building online web-based services. It's more of success criteria and goals that you would meet. And then it's kind of up to you to make sure to interpret those and to apply those to your work. Now, what's nice about that is it's very much, very possible that your services currently meet a lot of those goals already. And of course, you can test for those things. But just kind of know that this is more of an internationally has international input and is probably the most ubiquitous and the most known guideline set that's out there. Section 508 is a US standard that is maintained by the federal government. And that is one that is very applicable if your customer or your partner or whoever it is that you're building for has been financed through any sort of federal funds. So that's just something to kind of know, that you may not only need to try to meet WCAG, but you might need to meet Section 508 as well. But that all sort of depends on your customer base and what it is that you're required to meet. So just kind of know from that base level that you need to kind of suss out what it is that you're required and expected to meet, and then kind of go from that point. The nice thing is, several years ago now, Section 508 did what they call harmonize with WCAG. So a lot of Section 508 is when it comes to web applications and websites is covered in WCAG, and then Section 508 kind of goes beyond that into other technical avenues, such as maybe like kiosks and things like that. But from a website perspective or a web application perspective, it very much harmonizes with WCAG. So the next thing that I would probably say is to plan to build in accessibility from the start and don't take shortcuts. So for new services, it's really best to plan to have your services built with accessibility in mind from the get-go to meet those standards, because backfilling and repairing and fixing is a long and very complicated process. But for existing services, sometimes it's a process of finding where you can start and maybe start in areas of your application, your service, and start to locate an area of your service, get it up to meeting standards and beyond, and then heading to the next portion and kind of make it sort of a building block perspective. So you might start with a component or a widget or a feature, and then plan a roadmap to bring all of those aspects up to the standard. So that also means that you would want to take a look at the documents and other types of content that may not be website based or page based, and make sure that those are meeting the same criteria, the same guidelines. Because not only is your website necessary to be accessible, but all of your content and documents that you host and you might have someone download from that website are also required to be accessible. So that might be things like PDFs, Word documents, and things like that. One thing in our previous speaker, Kevin, had mentioned a little bit of artificial intelligence and those types of things. It's just advice that I have to just steer clear of things like accessibility overlays, because those are they're unreliable, and they also don't actually fix any of the issues on your website. They just more kind of band-aid those and make it appear like you're meeting standards when you're really not. So just steer clear of those things and make sure that you do fix the actual heart of the matter, which is your actual website and its documents as well. Step 3 is hiring and training a knowledgeable, empathic technical team. Also building a testing process and just getting that backing from your leadership and know your expectations. So the accessibility standards like WCAG have been around since the 90s. So there is a lot of developers, user experience designers, and and people that maintain content that have built with accessibility in mind. They're not difficult to find, although it would be something to add to things like job postings and things like that to make sure that you do go out and try to find those people and add them to your team. And if you can't, there are a wealth of training resources out there. Section 508.gov actually has outlined training and certification process and testing procedures, all sorts of things that have been well established a long time ago. And you might be able to train your staff to get to that point. But it is possible to find a knowledgeable and empathic technical team, or to build one, or to train them to get to that point. And as far as the testing process goes, accessibility testing can actually happen all the way from the development through the content building, through maintenance, and then on top of that, adding in human testing and getting public input. So these are just a few of the tools that I've seen the state and state partners use and that we have used in the past. At the development level, we've used something called AxeCore that you can give, that a developer can actually include in their development process and test at that level. Also, Siteimprove, who just spoke a little bit ago, has APIs that developers can use to kick off automated rechecks and recrawls of a site or an application and make it part of sort of their process or their build process. Automated testing is what Kevin was talking about a little bit more, and that's where that helps to test and monitor for issues on an existing site or an existing service. And we've seen not only Siteimprove used, but another tool called Total Validator that's a little bit more better for a smaller use case than maybe a really, really large site. And then on top of that, and speakers prior to me have talked about this, about human testing and public input. It's just very, very important to make sure that you have human input and human testing on top of any automated testing that you might do. Step 4 is educating your non-technical staff about accessibility fundamentals and provide them the tools to play their part. So I constantly hear that I can't make my service accessible because I don't have developers that know how to do that. And I'll say that 60 to 85% of a website is typically page content and documents. And that the people that maintain that are not typically your developers. They're typically your content writers, your authors, and your web people. And giving those non-technical staff accessibility tools and charging them to play their part and test their content maybe before it even gets to the website is really, really important. I'll leave this in here for the slide deck, but this is just a bit of a chart to show you kind of a skill level and how often I typically see issues on a website, accessibility issues on a website or violations. And most of those happen by the content that we write and the documents that we upload, things at that level, and very, very few actually pervasively happen because of development decisions. Once you get a template or a framework up to a standard, the thing that changes the most is actually your page level content and your documents. So I would say about 60, 85% of those documents, add on top of that your pages, and that's the bulk majority of what your visitors actually see. So having accessibility knowledge and teaching non-technical staff, meaning non-developers, those skills and getting them the tools to do testing and play their part and make change is very, very powerful. Step 5, and this is the last one here, is to really be open, include external testers, and expect critique and complaints. And on top of that, have a process to collect, track, and address those. So that's a really important thing to have on your website. And that could be as simple as a contact form, an email address, or a phone number that someone can call to get help or to request changes or to point something out that's not quite right on your website. And build a process to be able to collect, track, and address those things and get back to that person if they want to be contacted that something's been improved. So real quick, how can you select accessible services? A lot of that is the same stuff. Again, understand your requirements and goals. And step 2 is match those requirements and goals to your software and vendor selections. And one way that's very, very powerful to do that is to check your services and anything you might be interested in purchasing for something called a VPAT, a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. And that is basically a document that explains how that service actually meets certain guidelines like WCAG or Section 508. And here's a quick example. This is a live chat software that you might have seen out on the web. They have a VPAT, and it basically shows you when they were when it was tested, when their conformance date was last tested, and then it goes line by line in the guideline or the standard, and it shows exactly if they don't support one of the criteria, and any sort of remark or explanation, such as we don't have video on here, so therefore the requirement to have captions doesn't really apply to us. So looking for things like that can help you sort through the vast array of options out there and find something that you can know is proven to be to meet the same guidelines and requirements that you have selected or determined are right for your work, your services, and your visitors. And like all things that are out of the box, once you set them up and you start customizing them, make sure you test not only your customizations, but also test with customers to make sure that you continue that inclusion and that input from your visitors. And with that, I'm open for any sort of questions.
Thank you, Matt. And I just want to mention real quick in relation to Matt's comment earlier that human testing could be a very valuable part of accessibility related testing. The state of Oregon in the past, when it comes to supporting folks with visual impairment, we have involved the Blinds Commission. So involving domain experts and the user community is a very important aspect of any kind of testing, and I think accessibility is no exception. So with that said, I now like to turn the floor over to our final speaker, who is Bhushan, our program chair. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit and then tell us a little bit about matters relating to PNSQC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ying. My name is Bhushan Gupta. I'm the program chair for year 2022. And I'm just going to talk in general about what we're putting together. Before I do that, I really want to appreciate all I have heard from each of the speakers here. It was just great. From definition, to measurement, to what it is, to the tools and the services. Wonderful job. Jack, I knew it. Jack, Mike, Kevin, and Matt. Great job. Let's give them a hand. Only two things stood out. One is humble. I know I can use that in everyday life. It really literally translates there very well to my day-to-day life. And then AI. I started teaching in 1985 at Oregon Tech. And that's when I first thought about AI. 40 years later, almost 40 years later, people are still saying, don't depend too much on AI. And I don't know how long that will go on. But again, thank you very much. We really enjoyed your presentation. So this year, our main conference is on October 10th to 12th. And really, we're gearing up for that. And we really want to thank NIC, Oregon, and Tyler Tech for putting this together, supporting it, sponsoring it, and providing all that. PNSQC conference this year is October 10th to 12th. And I know Yinky has talked about PNSQC, but I have misspelled attachment to PNSQC. I started becoming involved with PNSQC in 1998. Almost 25 years later, I can't believe I'm as enthusiastic as I was at that time about PNSQC. So it's a great thing for me. I talked about the conference. We always have it in fall time in Oregon, in Portland. We're totally volunteer-based, totally volunteer-based. Nobody gets paid. We put our efforts together. We get all the help we can get from volunteers. And we cover a broad range of topics. And most speakers we invite are there to share their experiences, their learnings, and spread the knowledge around. That's the main purpose of PNSQC conference. You can get involved in multiple ways. You can be a speaker, write a paper, and you'll get a chance to speak. Even if you're a newbie, we support you. We provide all the help you need. You can review papers. You can be a sponsor, work with a company. If you're working with a company, be a sponsor. You can organize events. So many things you can do. I know I've been involved for so long, and every time I found out ways to help out PNSQC. Like I said, we're a volunteer organization, so more volunteers we have, better we are off. You can be program chair like I am, and you can be a board member. You can start wherever you want, basic volunteer to the president of the organization. We're very open. This is a special year for us. We are celebrating 40th anniversary of PNSQC. So make your story, bring your story, become part of it, and make a memory out of it. And the call for papers is already open, and you are welcome to submit a paper. Just go to our website. A lot of benefits about being a speaker. You get to share your knowledge. You make people learn from your experiences. There is no fee to attend. You get to present on the stage. You get a public speaking experience. There are just so many things you can learn from being a speaker at PNSQC. So I want to say the call for abstract submission is open. Let your friends know, let your colleagues know. Submit a paper. The deadline is April 27th. And if your paper is accepted, you'll get a chance to present it to a broad audience. Our attendance is fantastic. This year, we are hybrid. We'll have a physical location as well as online. So you will really get to experience a lot. I want to thank Ying for organizing this event and Matt helping out. Max helping out with everything else. And with that, I'll return it back to Ying.
Thank you so much. Now there's some time, 10 minutes or so. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions for any of our speakers. Comments is welcomed. Also questions about the PNSQC, our program chairs here. So if there's anything, please feel free to send it in through the chat line of Zoom, or those in the room, of course, just go ahead and ask. I'll repeat the question. Yes, Mas.
Can you explain one more time what the state of Oregon, what your department does?
Okay, that's a very good question. For those of you that are not state staff, the state government is a very large place. All the agencies have their different stated mission, but when it comes to IT related governance, the responsibility belongs to the Office of the State CIO. Now it's called the Enterprise Information Services. Within this pretty large office, there's the State Data Center and a whole bunch of enterprise programs. My colleagues, Jack McDowell, who's one of the speakers, and Cody Anders, we are responsible for 2 of the many programs, and these programs include the e-government program, which was referred to quite a bit by our speakers today, as well as the statewide quality assurance program. The statewide quality assurance program has among its different responsibilities, helping the state agencies improve their quality and risk management of major IT projects, as well as administering statewide quality assurance related requirements for major IT investments of the state. So we very much are in the software quality business as it relates to state government. And over the years, I've been honored and privileged to serve different state agencies when it comes to their quality assurance requirements. And professionally, I learned a lot through the PNSQC organizations. My first time attending PNSQC was by now at least 15 years ago, if not more. So I've been attending conferences and have presented a number of papers. The peer review process I found to be a very interesting and productive part of the authoring process. And, as I got involved more with the organization, like Bhushan said, I got exposed to PNSQC's different work. And PNSQC has been very supportive of me trying to bring some of these webinars and meetups to state government. And I think I speak for myself as well as my colleagues that we have the opportunity of a level of public service through the PNSQC organization. And that's also very gratifying, as well as the main function of PNSQC, diffusing knowledge and information. So there's significant synergy, I think, between the statewide QA program and the work of PNSQC. And I appreciate the opportunities of continuing the work in state government and volunteering my time with PNSQC. Any other questions or comments among our Zoom? The comment as well as a question is from one of our colleagues in state government from the Department of Transportation. And the comment was along the line of ODOT, especially the DMV has recently gone through a modernization process, replacing its legacy system for licensing with a more modern web-based system. It's a system provided by a company called Fast Technology, which incidentally also provides a state's revenue collection system and is in the process of doing the employment department unemployment insurance system. The question is how can state employees be involved more with quality assurance and other types of work that pertains to software quality. I would like to say that there are many ways actually. The state government has a organization that is a project management user group. I think that I strongly recommend connecting with that. And the person in ODOT that knows quite a bit about this is Ben Khan, who was also the head of the modernization program for the DMV effort I mentioned earlier. Professional organization of all types. There is the Project Management Institute on the one hand, and of course, this organization, PNSQC, is directly involved in advocating improved practices, knowledge diffusion for software quality. Software quality means different things to different people. The three tracks of this year's conference, like last year, are kind of different aspects of quality management that include process, technology, as well as management. It's my hope also to work with the board of PNSQC to kind of improve the management track, working with some of our industry sponsors and colleagues in making our work in the different facet of quality management. I think there are many of us in state government that can see improvement opportunity with work relating to architecture, business analysis when it comes to understanding business processes and their improvement. And then of course, the actual design and implementation of solutions by working with contractors better. some of our largest solutions acquire, not built by state staff. And so there is significant opportunity for us to all work together to improve that process, so as to minimize failure modes, but also to produce improved outcomes. So I think there are lots of rooms we can work together. Those of you that want to look for more opportunities to expand your knowledge and ideas sharing and things like that, please feel free to contact the Statewide QA program or the e-government program. Yeah, the comment from Bhushan is, that was a remarkable comment made by our colleague, Amy Stark, earlier about the possible connection between accessibility and homelessness. And that go back to Jack's, when he was presenting the importance of understanding your user community, that the very idea of quality ultimately is tied to the context of your user community. And we use the term community of meanings, which is, I think, a term that's pretty common in the social sciences. Jack is obviously very well read in these subjects. And I think government is one of these places where our constituency in state government is, of course, every Oregonian. So our reach, especially during the COVID emergency, led us all to think very hard about how to serve everyone. And this isn't necessarily something that all private organizations would need to do, but you too have your user community that you have to think through the community of meaning. So I guess myself, on behalf of my team, as well as those that work in state government, I think we're committed to serving those folks with kind of a human-centric considerations. And we hope all of us would have the opportunity to think more about groups that may be underserved and increase access. As I said, and I can't emphasize this enough, the word accessibility really means ability to access. Yes, we have another question.
My understanding is that the web is mostly mobile first, is that right? Or, I've noticed as a homeless person that most services which are accessible to me through a phone are appletized or created as an app, and those are very mobile friendly, where you just go download it, grab it, interact with it, serve the database the way you need to get whatever services you need done. Where generally, if a homeless person needs to get on a website that it does not have a mobile first approach or an application available, they'll end up at like a library or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know any other way you could make access any more available than advertising things.
Yeah, I think the comment is regarding need for applications and website to be mobile friendly, as well as taking into account, especially in the case of homeless people, probably all they would have access to is at best, a small format kind of screen of a smartphone, if they have that, or otherwise the public library. To that, I like to kind of comment that, we're of course have the aim of serving as many as possible, and we have the obligation to really serve all. So we are open for input and ideas as to how we can do better. Together with our contractor, NIC and Tyler, we hope to improve the user friendliness of our web pages and applications on mobile devices. And we have a long way to go, and I am humbled by the fact that technology is changing very rapidly, both creating challenges when it comes to the digital divide, but also present many possible solutions for folks with different types of needs. So I think we can look forward to use of, I hope, voice-based technology to support those with literacy and English or Spanish difficulties. And I also hope that, our use of electronic devices, we can provide accommodation for those that have challenges when it comes to the digital divide. So I think these are all among very worthy cause. And I hope our folks in the private sector will both work with us to provide the necessary solution, as well as being involved in the community to help with some of these issues, whether it's poor access to digital devices, internet, or of course, homelessness and all range of social and community issues. Yes, I'm happy to announce that our next meetup is about a month from now. The exact date will be announced, and Tyler Technologies will be sending a speaker to speak with us about ways to modernize licensing and case management system by leveraging the cloud. And I think that appears to be a very timely subject, you know, the use of cloud for secure applications in the public sector. Of course, licensing system affect many in the private sector in regulated professions. So please look for this announcement to come over the next week or two. And like this one, we hope many of you in state staff would join us to kind of understand the state of the art of licensing system. Yes, and our colleagues from NIC said that this event we have arranged to set up in Salem, so to make it more convenient for state staff. So also a little bit change of venues, and NIC and Tyler will again be hosting not just the physical venues next time, but also lunch and opportunity for social networking among state colleagues and our private sector friends. All would be welcomed, and not just state staff, all folks interested will be welcome to participate. And we feel these events are one way that we can provide and give back to the community. So join us if you have time, and please look forward to this email invitation in your inbox. I think we are at the end of the Q&As, and thank you for spending your time with us. Those of us up here in Northeast Portland, we're going to spend a little bit of time networking, and we will leave our Zoom line open for people to chat if they want to. And so it will be unmoderated, so feel free to use the chat. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.